Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Zon Academy. I apologize to all of you today. My camera is not working. There's always some kind of technical difficulties, right? When you need things to work. But I have somebody wonderful here who is going to be discussing such an amazing journey of his. His name is Don Albensi. Hi, Don. Thank you so much for
Hi,
joining
Fran.
me
How are
here at
you?
Don. I'm great. I'm great. We're so happy to have Don here. He's going to be spreading a ton of knowledge to you guys and ladies about his whole journey and understanding how he became such a success in the laboratory industry, why he decided to sell his lab, how he came upon selling his lab, what he would do differently, and what you should know about the process. So Don was really gracious about Q&A and answering questions as he goes along. So please, if you have any questions, type them into the Q&A section of your keyboard so that we could see them right away and we can make this very interactive because that's exactly what he wants. He wants this to be an interactive webinar. So I'm going to turn this over right now. And Don, good luck. And thank you for joining us here on Zon Academy.
Thank you, Fran, and thank you, Erica, for putting this together. I am honored that the folks back at Zon called on me a few months ago and said, "Hey, we'd like you to speak at the Chicago meeting this year." And for those of you who know me, I've been out of the industry for almost 9 years. I sold in 2017 after 38 years in being in the industry. And starting out as a one-man lab, and at the end being, I think we might have been up there in the top of the laboratories in the country at the time, was quite a journey. And so I'm going to share my journey with everybody. I can't see who's on the list of the folks that are here today, but if you know who I am, please shout out. I'd like to say hello to you. And unlike the presentation, I don't have notes here, but I chose some pictures that were going to jog my memory, I hope, and I hopefully enjoy my journey. So let's start with the next slide here. And again, I want to thank these folks here at Zon. And okay, so here we are from humble beginnings. And I think it would make sense to let folks know where I came from and how I started in this industry, and my background. And so I grew up in a family that had three brothers, and my father owned a bakery. Now, those are kind of the pictures from the era back in the 60s, just to give you an idea what a bakery looked like back then. And we did everything from scratch. Back in those days, that we didn't have Panera bakeries and all these other fancy places. Most cities had their own bakery, but in those bakeries, we learned a lot. Everything from ordering materials to the right recipes, baking, glazing donuts, sounds familiar, all the way to marketing and selling. So I didn't realize at the age of 14 and 15 when I first started that I was starting to get some of my background in sales and marketing and how to produce something. Next screen. Next, please. There you go. So I thought this was funny. I came across this when I was putting my presentation together. And take a look at that. It was like cheesecakes back in 1969, 68, at 65 cents for an entire cheesecake. Uh, there was not a lot of profits back at that time, but somehow we made it, and we had a great life growing up in the industry. Next screen, please. I like that. Margins were tighter than my apron strings. I thought that was funny. So, my high school was pretty much normal. When I graduated, my idea was to get into dental school. I wanted to be a dentist at the time, but it was different times back there. 1974, I graduated from high school, and I spent about 2 years at Penn State. And I decided at that point I was not going to be a dentist. And in Pittsburgh, that's where I'm from. In Pittsburgh at the time, we had a trade school. It was Median School of Allied Health Careers. That's median, not comedian. But we so I got a 9 month course under my belt in dental technology. Now then, I don't know. I think we had about a 3 to 6 month training period at a dental laboratory, and that was my education at the time. From that period to the time I opened my laboratory was about a 3 year period, and that's when my training really happened. I situated myself in a laboratory where we learned model preparation, making models, cutting dies, stitching dies. And then once they said, well, that's it, that's where you're going to be, I went to the next lab and I learned how to wax, cast, metal finish, and get substructures done. And when I was ready to move on to porcelain, they said no. So then I got my third job, and that was working for a prosthodontist where I learned how to create ceramic restorations. And I learned that from a good old guy that was sat there, and I found out he was actually a landscaper at the time and learned to trade. I don't know how, but we worked together, and he taught me how to build, contour, and finish the crowns the way he was taught. And next slide, please. So that took me to about 1979, and I was married at the time. I think it was 23. And the wife and I both together were bringing in close to $36,000 a year, making about $9 an hour each in our profession. My wife was a medical secretary, and I was a dental technician. And somewhere about in the middle of the year, we found out that we were expecting our first. And on September 20th, he was born. Ironically, that was the last day I worked for anybody else in my life, right? I started my dental laboratory that year. That is not a picture of me. I thought that was probably appropriate of what a dental technician looked like in 1979. That would be on the right. The left side picture there, I thought it was kind of funny. That was actually the first dental tech school in the country. So it's changed quite a bit. But when I started the laboratory, uh, I basically, I'm like, well, I've got to go buy all the equipment. And I can remember this. I was able to muster up about $2,500 through a loan, and that was enough to buy a porcelain furnace, a burnout furnace, uh, grinders, metal finishers, a belt-driven handpiece, everything we needed to open up my laboratory. $2,500. So that's how I started in 1979, and I thought I knew what I was doing. Thankfully, I didn't realize, what I didn't know, because I don't think I ever would have gone any further than this. But I started knocking on doors, and the first 10 to 12 dentists that I knocked on their doors all decided to send me work. I don't know if they felt sorry for me or not, but uh, I think back in 1979, if those of you who are out there were in the industry at that time, would remember that porcelain to metal restorations were relatively new. Back then, there was a lot of acrylic facings on gold restorations. But even when I was in dental tech school, several years before that, the school actually brought in their first porcelain furnace, and they started teaching ceramics. So, I had something different to offer. So I just wasn't knocking on the door saying, "Hey, I'm Don Albensi. I'm here making, I can produce dentures." I was actually manufacturing crown and bridge, and they sent to me. Next slide. And that was in 1979, and throughout probably the next 10 to 15 years, we grew slow. I hired employees that came from different backgrounds. I uh, learned from them, but I learned as we started getting larger that continuity of the product was an issue. And if you had three ceramists and each one came from a different background, number 14 looked different from whoever created that restoration. And And I found that, we would find dentists and we would lose dentists. And I think the problem there was because of continuity of our products. Uh, I, was searching, and I found out that there was this product out there that a lot of the large laboratories use. It's called PTC, Productivity Training Corporation. And I knew about it for maybe half a dozen years before I really got serious with it. It was a pretty expensive system to get into for the laboratory my size. But I thought, if we're going to grow, we need to bring something in here that we can all work with together. So in about 1995, I introduced PTC to my dental laboratory. And so again, how many years is that? 16 years. We pretty much did everything the same way. So we brought PTC in. I thought, well, this will be great. Everybody will accept it. Well, I was, surprised that most of these seasoned technicians had no plan on changing. So I slowly lost almost every technician I had. But as they started bringing in new technicians, some with no experience, it was very easy to train with this program. And it actually was the first time, I have to say, that something changed in the industry. And it wasn't digital, it wasn't anything other than having a system that now we could work with, PTC. Fran, is there any questions at this point?
So far,
Okay.
I don't see any, Don.
Okay. All right. Okay. So can we see the next slide then? Okay. So John Ness, God bless John Ness. He became a very good friend of mine. And not only did I bring PTC in as a tool to use, we actually had a license to become a school. The school only lasted about 2 years, but I was able to bring a larger amount of folks in. And we even had an assistance with the local government to bring in unemployed or people looking for a position. And we trained probably about 30, and I think maybe 3 of them ended up being dental technicians. So my point I'm making is that the school wasn't a great idea, but we tried it. But in the meantime, we started growing. We started having continuity. Crowns were able to be uh, uh, made by hand and on a timely basis, a more efficient basis. And I thought, great, we've got a great dental laboratory now, and I doubt if anything's ever going to change, right? So I just want to thank John Ness. He was a great mentor, and he passed away in '09. But he not only changed my laboratory, I believe at the time that he changed the industry. And he created a lot of systems for a lot of laboratories that were able to grow. Thank you, John. Next, please. So, just when I thought everything's going to be status quo from here on out, I'll never forget back in the early, maybe 5 years later, so 2000, 2001, I was at the Cal Lab meeting in Chicago, which I attended religiously every year. I'm there to learn what's the newest, greatest porcelain, what's the, equipment, whatever was happening. And so we get there this year, and I'll never forget a gentleman, when they had an open mic, stood up, and his name is Ellen Barnes. And Ellen said, "Hey, does anybody heard anything about what's going on overseas? We're getting a lot of laboratories in Asia and China primarily that are sending work over here, and crowns for under $20 a restoration." Now, mind you, I was doing porcelain non-precious crowns at the time for, I think, $75. And I'm telling you, I was at single digit profits at that point. And so when I saw something like this, like $20, there's no way we can compete with something like this. And honestly, I was upset. A lot of other people were upset. And, I just left it at that for about 1 month. And 1 month later, I got a phone call when I was back in Pittsburgh by a client that represented about 50% of my revenue coming into my lab. It was an office that had about six offices throughout Pittsburgh, I got this phone call, and he said, "Hey Don," he said, "I hate to do this," he said, "but I have to find a lower cost restoration for my business." He says, "And I don't care if you have to go to China to get the restoration." And I'm sitting there going, "Well, it's funny. I just heard about this, right?" So I had no idea where to find this. I just simply got on the internet at the time for what it was, and I just looked for laboratories in China, and only two names came up, and I sent the same request to both, and the one that came back was Dr. Tion Wu, and he owned a laboratory called Royal Dental Lab, and he said, "Yeah," he said, "Sure, I'd love to work with a laboratory in the United States. Would like to have presence there," and so shortly after that, I decided to put together about 25 crowns, 25 cases, I should say. And it ranged from everything from a denture to single crowns to bridges, even veneers. And I sent 25 cases out on a Monday. And the following Monday, they returned and they were perfect. And so at the time, I had about 30 employees, and I was very transparent with them. I said, "Look, we have to do something. There's going to be a huge hole in our workspace here. If we lose this client, we don't want to lose them. And here's a way that we can keep them. And I had them all look at the restorations, and they all agreed, this is now 25 years ago, that it was a beautiful restoration. So, of course, panic set in quickly. And I reflected back to the time when I brought PTC in, and I said, wow, look at this. You know, um, Very similar to what had happened back when we brought PTC in. And you know what? I'm going to go back to when I started my lab quickly in 1979 in McKeesport, in the Pittsburgh area. It was thriving with steel mills. That was the main source of business. In 1981, all the dental laboratories left. And that was the first time I was faced with change. I had a choice. I could either just close my lab or I have to change. Back then, the change was drive outside of the steel mill areas and look for dentists that aren't supported by the steel mills. So I made it. That was my first change. The second change was the PTC, introducing that, and the third change was getting involved with outsourcing. Each change has its own series of problems with it, but also it has its own series of success. So I actually lost when I started outsourcing. I think maybe 5 or 6 of my employees quit because they said, "Well, it's only a matter of time before Don shuts the doors here, and he's going to send everything offshore." And that was never my intention. In fact, what happened was quite opposite of that. As I started to grow this outsourcing business, and we actually had a different name for it. It was Innovative Dental Arts. And as we grew that business, the same dentists who were sending work for low prices were also sending work that we could do here in the States. So they had the opportunity to send to Albensi Dental Laboratory, domestic, and also they could choose the outsourcing side. So the tide actually grew the same. My force went from 30 employees to about 90 employees in the next 10 years. And, it was probably 1/3 of that was helping out over on the outsourcing side. And the other 2/3 was still the dental laboratory side. And that stayed. I said, okay, this is great. This is the way of the world. Here we go. Nothing's going to change, right? Well, this time it only took about 2 years more. And but let's talk about this outsourcing a little bit more. So that actually is Hong Kong, and the first time I went there, I landed in this little city. Next picture, please. Next slide. This is Shenzhen, This is the industrial city in China where my dental laboratory was located. Um, I think in 20 years prior to that, it was a fishing village with, they said, about 50,000 people. Here it was 20 years later. It was one of the top industrial areas with 5 million people at that time. And I think currently it's about 20 million folks there. And they're still doing a lot of work for a lot of industries. Next picture here shows the dental laboratory uh, that I walked into for the first time. And that's when I knew this is here to stay, right? How can we compete with this? These are young, talented people, not like any of the nightmare stories that you heard that there's 12-year-olds working at the bench, you know. Uh, these were dedicated people that were hungry, talented, and weren't afraid to work, right? Next slide, Pete, please. There's a little problem there. So yeah, and it was a lot of industries over there that I saw. I mean, right down the street, Apple had its own factory. Um, and a lot of these factories that went over there, when they went, they didn't come back. I mean, textile. I just figured dental laboratory business is another business that will never come back to these shores. Um, and I feared the American dental laboratory was disappearing. Why not? I mean, just look at all the other industries. But something happened, and this was my fourth change. Next picture, please. Okay, there's our factory with iPhones, of course. And next. Okay, this is a good picture here, and this is part of the reason why outsourcing was going so well. FedEx started making trips to China from Pittsburgh, daily. So, if I picked up a case on a Monday and had it in our package to go overseas, they had it the next day, and they worked 24 hours a day. So in 2.5 days, they actually had the restoration finished. And it was not unusual to have a case back. If I sent it out on Monday, it was back on Friday. 5 days turnaround. Again, I thought, well, how could we ever even get close to doing something like that here in the United States, where we only work 8 hours a day? My laboratory didn't work weekends, so it would take us probably 7 days to 10 days to finish that restoration in an 8-hour period. So it took normally 2 weeks, which at the time, dentists were quite comfortable with a return date in 2 weeks. No need to change. But when we started offering like cases back in a week, a lot more people went for our innovative dental art side. But yeah, FedEx changed a lot at that point. So next view, please. Next picture. Yeah, something else happened, and I think everybody knows where I'm going. Next slide. Digital dentistry arrived at the perfect time. So what I feared that was going to destroy our laboratory and our industry actually funded our transformation. Back in the time when digital first came along, most laboratories, you know, couldn't see buying a milling machine for $35,000 that really wasn't even out there for that long, wasn't tested. Scanning machines, getting involved in that. But I good timing for me. It was the revenue that I was receiving from my outsourcing business that helped uh, transform my laboratory from mainly analog manual to digital. Next slide, please. So, I remember that one, the Cirac machine on the top left there, that was actually introduced to dentists first, right? They're like, the manufacturer said, well, we got a hold of this, the laboratories are in trouble now. Fortunately, that fell in the hands of the dentist. And, you know, there's a lot of good ones out there. For the most parts, they do dentistry really good, and we make crowns pretty good. So that really didn't take away from the industry that I first thought. Um, but we ended up buying one of those, and I started milling crowns with Emacs back then with that. But the other machines that came along, they weren't all winners. Remember, I bought one um, printing machine, and it was $134,000. I don't think I printed one model with it. Uh, so I learned from that, and I said, okay, let's make sure some of the stuff that we get is already proven. And we got into the scanners. Three shape scanner was our baby. It produced great restorations. We got into 3D printing. Bottom left there, where it's showing the removables. When I sold my laboratory, that really wasn't around at the time, but I know that's out there now, doing very well. So we had all this digital going on, right? And then we were able to produce restorations very accurately, or we started seeing remakes coming down. This digital world was really going in the right direction. Next slide, please. So, this was one of the problems with dentistry, and probably still is the impression material. I'll never forget, Dr. Gordon Christensen once had a report that said that over 10% of all impressions that we receive are distorted. So I was actually pleased to hear that my remake factor back then was between 4 and 5%. But if it's 10% distorted, that meant there was another 5% of crowns that were probably being inserted that probably shouldn't have been. But that was the way of the world back then. And, that's impression material. So when the doctors, next slide, please. When our clients started to get these digital scanners from like Itera and the other ones that are out there, I think that is when things really started to shake. So now we have a digital. I'll tell you the first client that I had, and he was out in Colorado, and he bought. His name was I can't remember his name offhand, but he sent me. He's all excited. He got himself an Itero scanner, and he calls me up on a Monday, and he says, "Don," he says, "I just sent you my first scan." He says, "Did you get it?" I looked, and I said, "Yeah, you're actually the first doctor that ever sent me a scan. And yeah, this is all we need." Now, we've already been scanning, obviously, impressions of models in the laboratory, uh, creating the margins, designing the restoration, and creating crowns very successfully for years. So now we have doctors are now doing these, sending these digital impressions. So it was no different. He ordered an Emacs restoration. So we got that restoration on Monday. Uh, we marked the margins, we designed the restoration, and I think we actually milled it out of our Emacs machine. And the next morning it was completed. We also had a 3D printer that printed the models. So I'd like to have a model at that time. I don't know what they're doing now, but I just felt comfortable having a model that I could put a crown on to check the margins and also check contacts and even the occlusion. So we came up with a little acronym. We called them PALMs, peace of mind. And we just made sure that those crowns fit on those models, and off we sent it. So he calls me Wednesday and he says, "Don," he says, "I got great news." He says, "I have another digital scan that's coming your way." And I said, "Well, I've got great news for you." I said, "The crown that you sent me Monday," I said, it'll be in your office today at before 10:30 a.m." And he couldn't believe it. And so we sent the crown out the following day, Tuesday, and he had it the next day, Wednesday. And for those of you that are in the industry and you have this type of technology, you're saying, "Yeah, no big deal, Don." But that's what dentistry is now. But at the time, I thought that was an eye opener. And I said, "We really have something different here now," and But I'm still working primarily in the Pittsburgh area, surrounding areas. Very little was going outside of the Pennsylvania area. And I realized I had something bigger than what Pittsburgh could uh, that I couldn't survive in Pittsburgh alone, right? So we had to market. Next slide, please. There we go. So yeah, that's more in regards to scanning, sending, designing. Next slide, please. We had the models, which I think we still need. I had a printer from Objet, and I just love that company. They had some really a great product. Next picture. Next. Okay, so how about this? It reduced our remakes from 5% to under 1%. It was like 0.05%, and I'm not kidding you. We didn't see any remakes coming back, and the doctors loved that, right? So now we're humming. And we also found out that, man, we can produce a lot more crowns. With this technology, we were able to produce more in home. Now, before this happened, it got to the point where 70% of all of our work was going offshore, and 25 to 30% we were doing here in the United States. But when we started getting the technology under our belt, things started to change. And I know when I sold my company, there's probably more like 20% was being outsourced and 80% was being done in house. So we were very fortunate to see our industry come back to our shores, where, like I said earlier, there's a lot of industries that once it left, it never came back. Excuse me. All right, next slide, please. So we decided to go national. So, what do you do? We have the capability. We just needed the visibility. So I hired a marketing director. We had a sales director, and I sent them off to, getting us seen out there nationally. Next slide, please. So here's some magazines. Uh, Dentistry Today, obviously, is still out there. It was one of the larger ones, and I was putting full page ads in these magazines. But there was one magazine in the center there from Jim Glidewell, Chairside, and I'm sure it's still out there, but in every dental office, you would see a Chairside magazine, and I can say that probably Dentistry Today may be in all those, but Chairside really looked attractive. And at the time, I was purchasing Bruxer material from Glidewell Laboratory. In fact, he even had a program once where he was actually supplying, producing milling machines, and I had a few of their milling machines in our laboratory. And I noticed Jim Glidewell never had any advertisements from anybody, let alone dental laboratories. And I asked Tom Taylor. I said, Tom, I'd like you to call up. He was my marketing director. Uh, I'd like you to call the folks at Glidewell and see if they would be interested in letting us advertise in their magazine. And Jim Shuck was the CEO at the time, and Jim says, well, I doubt if Jim will go for that. He said, but I'll ask him. And I think about 10 minutes later, we got the phone call, and Jim Glidewell was very happy that we were even thinking about advertising in his magazine. And the next issue that came out, somewhere in there, we had a nice ad in there explaining that we were a dental laboratory using Bruxer material, which was his material. And so what that did, that gave us, a lot of people looked at us differently at that point. You know, uh, Perception's everything. And when you have a national magazine, whether it's Dentistry Today or Chairside, and you're in there, you look pretty big. If anybody saw the laboratory, we were in a small little industrial park, and we weren't that large at the time. But man, the work started coming in. Next slide, please. Yeah, so from local lab to national laboratory, that happened very quickly. And so I went from 90 employees to about 200 within about 2 years. I bought another building. I bought a building that we housed our new laboratory, and we were in about 35,000 square feet. Uh, and I said, well, isn't that great? uh, and I felt very comfortable. I felt like, okay, we've done it. And this is back in 2015. And things are going very well, you know. Uh, I believe, I mean, it was not unusual to be, we were putting out 1,500 crowns a day between our outsourcing and what we were doing, in our laboratory. And I go back to the day when I first started. If I did 20 units in a week, that was a pretty good week. So, anyways, that was my growth and how I got there. Uh, Next, please. Next slide. That's the building that it was housed in. Uh, it it housed our laboratory, and it's actually National Dentex, as most people know, came along and was knocking on my door in 2017, and I had a decision. I I was not quite sure if I crossed the finish line yet, but there was other things going on in the industry, and I thought, I don't know where the industry's going, and somebody came along and offered you uh, the amount of money that I was able to sell my laboratory for. I thought this isn't going to happen again, and I talked it over with my wife, and we decided to sell the lab. So in October of 2017, we sold Albensi Dental Laboratory. Next slide, please. So what's everybody do? I go down to Florida. I built a house in Naples. I'm golfing, the sunshine. I thought that was it. But the next change in my life, I found myself um, not married. Ended up, the wife and I got divorced, and life had other plans. And actually, I got pretty tired of golfing every day. And so I came back to Pittsburgh. I have twin boys they were about 8 years old at the time, and I needed to come back to Pittsburgh. And I said, you know what? Next slide, please. So look at that building there. It looks familiar. The dental laboratory is still housed in that same building. It's about 70,000 square feet. So the one side is National Dentex Albensi, and this side here is now Core Event Center. And I decided to come back, and I owned the building, and the folks that were in there before owned this event center, and they wanted to retire. And I felt the desire to get back into doing something. So today I am the owner of Core Event Center. We are now taking care of the weddings in the area, high school proms, dances, everything from baby showers to wakes, and it keeps me busy. It's a different industry, same mindset, and so I don't know how much longer I'll be involved with this, but that's where I'm at right now. Next slide, please. So that's the inside of the event center. Next. Next. And decided to get married about 2 years ago. And that's Susan, my wife. We got engaged down in Aruba, and we got married at the event center back in November 30th of 24. And we have this next picture. That's inside. That was a wedding. And next picture, that's our lovely family. We have 8 children between us, 4 grandchildren. And I'm doing things a little bit differently now, right? Family's everything. Next picture. But the title of this show was what I would do differently. And looking back now, a lot of the mistakes that I made helped me get to where I'm at. Uh, there weren't a lot of people that I could look at, a lot of laboratories that I would say, hey, here's where I want to go. I mean, it, when there was outsourcing coming along, there weren't very many people outsourcing. When digital came along, there weren't very many folks that were into the digital side of it. Um, but I would probably say that I would have hired a CFO a little bit earlier. And I say that for this reason. Uh, Part of the reason why I decided to sell is I was getting involved too heavily with DSOs, these dental service organizations, which are really popular now. And, just like the dentist that came to me back when they said they need a less expensive crown, send it to China if you have to. Well, kind of happened again with these folks. And now we're not talking about, hundred thousands of dollars. We're talking millions of dollars difference. And so they sort of, I probably would not have gotten involved so heavily with DSOs. And I think a CFO would have made that very clear to me. The other thing is don't rush to the mountaintop. So I was 59 when I sold my laboratory, and I thought I was at the mountaintop. Um, Looking back, I believe I don't even think I was halfway there. I probably should have stuck in it. I wish I would have at this point. And I found out it was about the climb more than anything in this business. It was about the climb. I enjoyed it. Uh, of course, there's sleepless nights when you make some of these decisions, and uh, but there's nothing better of the reward of seeing success in the decisions that you make. And I was very blessed and lucky that a lot of my decisions did go the right way. So that's my story. I don't know how much time we have left, but Fran or Erica, is there anything that I can add? I don't know. Is there another slide here? I think that might be it.
There's your slide. That's your
Yeah.
last slide, and I will stop sharing because I believe there are questions and I couldn't get to them because I was sharing the screen. So I
Okay.
will stop sharing, Don, so that we can get to it, and I will look for the questions for us.
Let me just say something while you're looking. Uh,
Oh my
Ladies and
goodness.
gentlemen, I just want to let you know that so I've been out of the industry for 9 years, and again, I'm very honored that you taking the time today to listen to me. But again, I haven't been really in front of folks talking about this industry in a lot of years. So if I sounded rough, I apologize, but hopefully I may have shared something that help you now or in the future.
Oh, I'm sure you have. I'm sure you're helping a lot of people, and I know you have a friend here that has something to ask, Kent Colai. So, hi, Kent. I'm so happy that you're joining us. I'm sorry that we can't actually converse on this, but thank you so much for asking Don a question. So, Kent is saying it's great to see you, Don. Thanks for your time and always being willing to give back. When you sold your lab to NDX, was your lab sale a two-part transaction? Did they hold back a certain percentage of the sale price in reserve and attach an incentive additional percent of growth to be added upon the percent which they held back for whatever period of time or commitment they required of you?
That's a good question. So thanks for your question, Ken. So at the time, my son, Don Jr., was the general manager at the laboratory. So after negotiations, and it didn't take that long, I think within 3 months, we came to a price, and we settled in October of that year. I think literally 3 to 4 months it transpired. And I know some of the other laboratories that went through this process. They requested that the owner would stay there for an additional year for the transition. And I think, and they didn't want me. They said, we have Don Jr. Thank you very much. If there's something else you need to do or finish, by all means stick around. But if you are, you know, if there's no no other thing that you're working on right now, no, you can exit. So the day that I, signed the papers was the last day that I worked in the dental laboratory. Now, in regards to your question about holding back funds, like most transaction like this, it would be very wise for the buyer to make sure they hold back something, and they did. It was about, I believe, 10%. Yeah, it was 10% that they held back. And if in 1 year that the projections would continue to grow the way that we forecasted, I would receive the money. So I think that the business was on such a very good climb at the time. Within 6 months, we already hit our numbers. So we actually were able to take our last withdrawal within 1 year. So I think that answers your question.
Perfect. So the next question is, thank you for your story. I'm running a small lab. How can I how can I sell a small size lab?
Very difficult. You know, if you ever heard the word turnkey operation, I mean, that's where you want to be when you want to sell anything. If you're selling a small lab, and you may have, I don't know, would you consider small 20, 30 dentists you're working for, and they're relying on you uh, to supply the restoration. And if you leave, who's going to, who is going to be creating those restorations? Uh, if you had a staff there, I would say that could do that. You may want to consider selling it to them, because if not, they're not going to be very happy if somebody else comes along, and especially if they have no experience in the dental laboratory business, just reaping the profit, and the technicians are sitting there. Uh, but yeah, it's very difficult to sell something that really is a turnkey. And that's something that NDX recognized with our laboratory. Uh, One, we were very, very efficient. I was not needed, obviously, at the bench. I had a very good staff. And so I, I don't know if that answers your question or not. It's probably not the answer you're looking for, but uh, I would say that if you can make it a turnkey, uh, then you probably have something. Let me take that back. Let me take that back. There are laboratories out there looking to buy uh, laboratories that just to get the footprint in your area. So if there's some labs out there that you are could be your competition, they may be interested in taking your supply of dentist. So I'd probably explore that as well.
Great. We have another attendee asking if you could share more about what multiple you sold at. If you don't feel comfortable answering that, Don, that's totally fine.
Sure. No, I was surprised. It was something when National Dentex came along, and I don't know, I hope I don't get in trouble for talking about this. It's almost 10 years. I believe that the statues have worn out. But when they came to me, they knocked on my door. I was not looking to sell. And Larry Weiss was working for National Dentex at the time. And we met out in Chicago at the lab meeting. And he said, uh, would like to talk. And I said, well, I'm not really interested. And he goes, well, we think you are. Give us an opportunity. So they came in, and they liked what they saw, and they wanted to give me an offer. Now, I forgot to mention this earlier. Uh, so it's good. I'm glad you brought this up. About 4 months prior to that, I just decided to get a valuation of my company. And, I wanted it done realistically. I want real numbers, right? Why? Just in case somebody ever decided to buy my laboratory, I wanted to be prepared. I had no idea, right? So this is 4 months earlier. And so it came out, and I saw my numbers and the forecasting, and I said, wow. That's pretty good. Unfortunately, nobody's ever going to buy me for this kind of number, but it's nice to know I'm worth this amount. And the forecasting was great. And for the next 5 years, if I would have stayed there, there's no doubt it would have grown to where I would have had it, if not further. So we sat there, they did their due diligence. So, they came up with the number. And the number was about 5 times that current EBITDA, 5 times, which is pretty high. And so I said to them, well, thank
It'll
you
be a
very
while.
much. I
What?
said,
It's gonna
but
be a
we're a little
while.
bit shy. And they said, well, what do you mean? This is as high as the industry will provide. I said, well, thank you. I said, I appreciate your time, but I'm not willing to sell. And I said, but I want to show you something. And I have this book about my forecasting and my value from the valuation from a very reliable company in Pittsburgh. And they said, well, we have to think about it. And so the next day, early in the morning, I get a call from the CEO at the time, and he was a little upset. He goes, all right. He said, we'll do it, but don't come back for any more money. So we ended up getting 7 times EBITDA. Uh, and that was actually that was on growth. That was on forecast. So I did very well.
Are you
So I
ready for
think
the
that answers
next?
your question.
Yeah. Are you ready for the next one, Don?
Sure.
So Kent is back and he says he appreciates your transparency. Everything in life happens for a reason. I'm sure you agree. I love that you are helping those of us still in the industry, sharing successes you enjoyed, but also missteps. That says a lot about you. Do you feel you could have enjoyed the same or greater success if you had competed in the boutique high-end cosmetic niche as well? He's just curious. It seems that single digit net profits was not much juice for the incredible squeeze. Please share your hindsight.
Very good question. Very good question. You know, I uh, I was I thought I was a pretty good dental technician. I thought we did great work, but I knew I wasn't the Lee Culp or some of the better ones of the day. It wasn't that quality. But I realized when every time I stuck my neck out to try that, we're working with. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. The prima donnists, the dentists out there that expect A plus plus, and maybe they're willing to pay twice the amount, but they were twice of a problem. Okay. Uh, and so to get that standard, that high quality for the amount of units that thought of producing was very difficult. But I'll never forget this one time there was there was a meeting out in Lab Day, and there was Jim Glidewell, the owner of America Dental Laboratory, and Josh Green from Eber Springs from Green Dental Laboratory, and they were there in a circle answering questions just like this. And I'll never forget. They all agreed on this. They're like, we're not an A plus dental laboratory. Um, you know, would rather be the McDonald's and serve the millions and billions instead of being the boutique and trying to serve just the upper echelons. And I learned. I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense because since I'm already here, might as well stay here, know my grounds here, and I never forgot that. I want to say that we were B plus A, and we got the digital. I don't think we are probably back to A plus again as far as quality of the crowns. Never got into the larger restorative type of restorations. Uh, if I was still in the industry, I probably would be now. But yeah, we liked where we were at, and there were a lot more dentists out there in that level that we could go after that liked what we had to provide than there were at the higher end. So hopefully that answers your question.
The next one is from Jim, and he said he's a small three-person lab working for a dental clinic, doing about a half a million a year. He's 70. How do they make themselves known? Are there skill techs out there?
So again, Jim, I've been out since 2017. Um, I actually have a brother here in Pittsburgh that we worked together for a lot of years, and his laboratory is Maverick Dental Laboratory, and they're doing quite well. They continue to grow, uh, but I know finding technicians, especially since there's no dental tech schools anymore. You have to realize you have to train these people, and near the end, there was actually an art institute in Pittsburgh. And I was actually hiring people out of the Art Institute who had experiences in digital designing, and they were familiar with 3D printing and milling. Uh, we found out that we could teach the dental side of that relatively quick, you know, to young employees that have experience in that industry. Okay, uh, we had a very difficult time trying to train our technicians into the digital world, if that makes sense. So, if you're going to grow and you're growing the digital platform, you're probably looking for um, an Art Institute type of program in your area uh, that you could bring folks in and then teach them the dental side of it. That would be my advice to you.
So Kent agrees with you on what you said about Jim and Josh, that they profess to be the Walmart of dentistry, which is so true and funny but true. And Kent also he wants me to tell you that he has tremendous respect and admiration for you, and he thanks you for many, many contributions to all of us. And he said he knows that you just do you, but you are an extraordinary individual and businessman. And he wishes you much happiness and joy in your new endeavors and relationship journey, and that you're a good man. And he
Well, thank
also
you.
thanks all of us here at Zon and mentioned me as well. And I just want to say thank you, Kent, for supporting Zon Education. We are so happy, and I'm so happy to all of our attendees. We had a tremendous amount of attendees today. And I'm going to turn this back over to Don.
Well, it's 3 o'clock. I know we were going to finish this up at three. I really do appreciate everybody who took time out of today to listen to my story. Uh, I am not really busy with what I'm doing in the event center business. I have a team that takes care of it. But for anybody who would like to reach out and speak further, I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody. If I could help at all, please reach out. I don't know if I had on that one slide of my contact information, but uh, is there any way that they can get to you, Fran or Erica, to get my contact information?
We can definitely share your education, your information.
Okay, yeah, feel
Someone
free
would
to do
like to
that.
email us here at Zon at henryshine.com. They can absolutely send us an email. You will also all be getting the recording in your email in the next like day or two. So you'll be able to look back on this and see Don's slides again. But absolutely, if anybody would like to get in touch with Don, please, Zon at henryshine.com, and I would be more than happy to share his information. And he does mean it because in Chicago, he did a similar lecture for us, and we thought it was so wonderful that that's why we asked him back on Zon Academy. And he was supposed to enjoy the cocktail party with everybody else, but he was giving advice to, a whole bunch of people. So we just appreciate you, Don, and we're so happy that we reached out to you. Like you said, it took a while for someone to reach out to you, but I'm so glad we were the first ones. And watch out, because now everybody's going to be reaching out to you for your advice. So be careful.
Well, thank you very much. And I think I'm going to join my wife down at the pool in Sarasota for afternoon cocktails. So thank you all. Hopefully, you got a few laughs and a few gems out of this. And again, thank you all for listening.
Thank you all for joining us here on Zon Academy, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you back in April for some more education.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.